So when defining a schema, we have learned that we can set the type of a property directly here or use a schema type object. Now this object has a few properties. You have learned about some of them. You know the type property, you know the required, enum, and so on. In this lecture, we're going to look at a few more useful properties that are available on these schema type objects. So for strings, we have 3 additional properties that you can use. We have lowercase. We can set that to true. And with this, Mongoose will automatically convert the value of this category property to lowercase. So let me show you how that works. Back in our course object. Okay, first, I'm going to remove this validation error. So let's change category to web. And note that here I'm using an uppercase W, right? And I'm going to set tags to, let's say, front end. Now, back in the terminal, let's run the application. Okay, we created a course object and saved it to the database. Now look at the category. It's lowercase web. And if you look in Compass, let's refresh this list. So here's our new document. Category is set to a lowercase web. So this is how the lowercase property works. We also have uppercase. Again, we can set that to true. Now, technically, we should use one of these, not both of them. So I'm going to comment this out. And finally, we have trim. So if we have paddings around our string, Mongoose will automatically remove those paddings. So these 3 properties are available when using strings. Now, we have a couple more properties in this schema type object. And these properties can be used when defining any property irrespective of its type. For example, let's go back to our price property. Let's say we always want to round the value of the price. So we can define a custom getter and a custom setter. So getter, here we pass an arrow function that takes v or value as an argument. Now we can define our custom logic for getting this value. So we can apply math.round to round this value. Actually, this should be get, not getter. Now we can similarly define a custom setter, and here we pass a similar function. So v goes to math.round of v. So whenever we set this price property, the setter function will be called, and here we'll round that value. So with this, if we go back to our course object and set the price to 15.8, let's see what happens. So back in the terminal, let's run the application again. Look, we created a new course object and the price is set to 16. So here, when we set this value, our custom setter was called, and here we rounded this value. Now back in Compass, here's our last course document. You can see the price is set to 16. Now let's edit this. You can see the type of this property is set to int 32, which is an integer. I'm going to change this to double and then change the value from 16 to 15.8. And finally, click update to commit my changes. So here I'm simulating a scenario where we have a document that was stored in the database before we implemented this rounding logic. In this case, if you read these courses and then access the price property, our custom getter will be called, and here we'll round that value. So let me show you how that works. Let's go back to our getCourses function. Okay, so here's our getCourses function. Previously, we implemented this paging logic. In this demo, we don't need that, so I'm going to comment out these 2 lines. And then I'm going to change this query object so we can read that particular course. So we want to get the course with ID set to, let's copy the value of that course ID. So back in Compass, here's our course ID. Copy this and paste it here. Now here we're going to get 1 course, so we can access the first element of this array. Now, if you read the price property, you will see that the value of this property will be rounded. So I'm going to go to the end of this file and replace create course with get courses. Back in terminal, let's run the application. Okay, we got not a number because I realized when selecting this course, we picked only these two properties. So the price property is not read from the database. I'm going to include that here as well. Save. Back in the terminal. Let's run the application one more time. Okay, look. Price is 16, even though in the database we stored it as 15.8. So that's how these custom getters and setters work. The setter is called when we set the value of a property, like here, and the getter is called when we read the value of a property.